Just trying to understand how you are thinking and trying to peel a layer beneath what you just said. Uh, would you reckon that there is a possibility that the external environment generated volatility could give a tactical opportunity which is significant in nature? Or do you believe because of local flows, maybe because of even global flows into portfolio schemes such as yours, etc., that such opportunities would be quickly bought into? Because until recently, we've seen most dips getting bought into very, very quickly. Are we still in the same environment, or could there be an extended pullback, if you will?
I think, Neeraj, we need to all recognize that what's happening in our country is something that happens once in a century. So these are structural changes. I think we must use every dip not to think of it as tactically, but to think of it as a huge opportunity structurally. I think, companies are reshaping very well. Landscape is changing. In these last 10 years, we have demonstrated huge stability economically, socially, and politically. So I think India is now standing out amongst all the emerging markets. And now, even really, if you ask me, I haven't seen a time like this where we are, even looking better than many of the developed countries. So I think where we are today, this is the start of a super cycle for growth. India is just being, I think, scratching the surface of what we are visualizing in the next 2 decades. And I think there I see a very long and strong runway. The faster we get invested in high quality businesses and stay put, I think we're going to see tremendous returns, the kind we haven't seen in the last 2 decades. So I think a very, very promising story ahead of us. And we should try to distinguish between these short term volatility bouts. I think that's going to continue to happen because we are in a very unstable world where I think the Western world is going through a structural decline in several areas. And I think that's not something that's going to, see any stoppage. So I think use these opportunities and use these declines to well position yourself and play out all the big themes that India is now basically offering you, like a discretionary consumption, a whole new capex cycle ahead of you, exports because of the China plus one and Europe plus one opportunity, and I think a huge FDI that's going to flow into India. So I think look at all of that as structural and use every opportunity, look at it structurally and make inroads into the market, stay fully invested. India's best is still to come.
There are some, Jiten, and I will talk about the risks as well, because I'm sure you would love to enumerate those too. But first, let me try and knock on the opportunities a bit. There are some which are a natural outcome of what happens when a country goes from a particular per capita to a particular per capita, or the demographic dividend that India might anyways present, irrespective of what the policy moves are. And then there are some policy moves led thing. Call it the Jam Trinity, call it the whole digital infrastructure, what have you. What are those 2 or 3 or 4 really high quality long-term structural themes that you like the most? If you can tell us a bit about those.
Well, I think the biggest of them all, I think, is some amount of structural reforms that are taking place, which are actually ensuring a huge investment cycle. Now, come to think of it, Neeraj, we have not seen any 5 year period where we have seen so much of volatility in the fiscal deficit, but the corporate tax rates have remained at 25.17%. I haven't seen a 5 year period where we have provided this sort of stability in taxation, this sort of confidence, and I think that brings the industry to return back to India, and I think invest back in India. The other big thing I would like to say is that the biggest, I would say, factor that makes me very optimistic is the feeling of optimism, conviction that India is the place to invest, and also the entire feeling amongst Indians that we have arrived. We finally have a leader that's doing a good job, a country which is in the right path of economic growth. So if I look back, maybe 1 or 2 decades ago, all the large industrial houses had invested outside of India. The Tatas made billions of dollars of investments in JLR, in Chorus, in lots of other areas. Mahindra's went and sort of bought out SsangYong. We had Bajaj that built out a unit in Indonesia. We had Kalyani's who took over several forging units outside of India. We had the Birla who took over Novelis. So if you could imagine that sort of capex in 2007, 8, 9, if it came into India, if what would have been Steel would have invested $15 billion at that point in time in building capacity within India. Now, when you look at the current capex cycle, right? Tatas are talking about putting in $90 billion, Reliance $150 billion, Adani is $50 billion. We're talking about Birla's putting $25 billion. All of it is going back into India. So I think everybody has realized that we've burnt our fingers going overseas. We've already seen what's happened. All of these industrialists have written off. Take an example of Bharti. They haven't been able to recover their investments in 15 years. So, everybody has realized India is the place to invest. They don't have a choice. Tailwinds are there. And not only that, I now see the whole world coming and rushing into India to invest. So I think this sort of confidence I've never seen in the last 2 decades. All the money, all the capex, everything coming into India. And now you capex cycle. What sort of job creation will happen? Where are we seeing our exports? We're seeing several industries coming up. Of course, the whole story has changed.